Hello, everyone. Before we start, there is a line that I want to share with you that I keep coming back to. It's Ted Chiang's. He says, "Don't think of ChatGPT as a mind. Think of it as a blurry JPEG of the internet." And I think that's quite clever, but it's also a bit unsettling. What happens to culture when it starts being a blurry picture of itself? And so these are some of the questions we want to explore today. We want to talk about what it means to be productive, what it means to be creative. And there's questions around, what value is, what even originality means in the wake of AI, when machines themselves, they can do all that work. And so, I'm very excited to be talking to my friend Mike. If you follow this series before, we've had conversations in the past. But what I haven't mentioned and what I haven't been very explicit is Mike has a very interesting combination of deep systems thinking, and he also brings like a set of very special and unique personal experiences. And so I think these experiences come from him having worked at some of the largest tech companies in the world, and most powerful as well, but also having lived in many different countries. And I'm very excited to be having, this is a conversation between the two of us. We'll be exploring themes around cognition, about embodiment, and just, how we relate to machines. And so let's dive straight into it. And Mike, welcome.
Thank you again. Yeah. And I mean, I can also say the same about you. I think you're one of my favorite people to talk to about these topics, to think through these topics with, right? Like we say all the time that I think nobody really knows exactly where this is going and everybody's just trying to figure it out. And I think you also bring a really interesting perspective to the table, which is why we founded Odyssey together.
Very nice. Yeah. And of course, how are you? You've been quite busy with Odyssey lately. You've been exposing yourself to to a lot of these questions that we're going to be exploring. And I do have a list of questions that I've said this in the past. Part of the reason why it excites me so much to be doing this podcast with you is because I have your undivided attention for 2 hours and a half.
I mean, you always have an undivided attention.
But when we're out, having a beer, whatever, it's just not the same level.
Fair enough.
Where you the granularity to which you can explore ideas, right?
I agree with that. And I think I've said this to you privately, but these conversations, these podcasts are actually some of my favorite things to do because it's a chance to zoom out and kind of think of the big picture implications of the technological change, all of the new capabilities that AI brings to the table, to think about what is what may the broader impact of all of this be on humanity, on our future, both the near future and the long-term future.
Right. And okay, so because I have limited time with you today, I want to get straight into the main question, which is you and I have talked about what it means to be an author in the age of AI, when generative tools can create a lot of these things for you, right? Are we talking about shared authorship with AI? Are we talking about us being the sole authors and then having tools that help us? How do you see this?
So it's a really good question. I think first and foremost, I think we have to be really careful. So there was something that you said in that question, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, which was shared authorship. And I think we have to be very careful not to anthropomorphize AI. And I'm not saying that AI can't in some ways be an author, but it is not, in my conception, a person. I think it is more for the moment. It is more, all the evidence we have is that it is more of a tool. It has grown out of the broader technological capabilities, quote unquote, technosphere that humans have created. And like other tools before it, it is a tool that we use, a capability that we've created that helps us create things, that create art, create text and writing, create culture. And so I wouldn't personify it in that way. So yeah, first and foremost, I just kind of want to say that. I guess the other point I bring out is that sort of tool aspect, right? And we've always used tools to create things. We've always used we've always built things out of like the broader cultural knowledge base, the societies we live in, where we think of ourselves, we really kind of like put on a pedestal the individual. And so we think of individuals as, this kind of privileged category. And I think that's just because it's a useful conception for us to like move through the world. Like, we are embodied beings. But I think very often it somehow misses the full way in which the creative process works. It's even when it feels like it's a lone genius, it's really not. There's a lot of other interactions with actual other people and with tools that co-create anything. So,
I do see your point, that like they are tools, but they're tools that semi-autonomously are creating. It's not like using a typewriter. That is very much it's very clear that that's a tool, the same with the paper and pen. But this time around, we're creating something. It's not Microsoft Word that we've created. We've created Microsoft Word that, with a bit of assistance and guidance, will create a story that you didn't even expect. When the author of, like the supposed author of a story, him or herself, is surprised of the outcome, right? When you're writing when you're typing words into Microsoft Word, and hours later you read it, like, that you wrote that and you're not surprised by it. But I think it changes the whole dynamic of like calling AI just simply a tool. It feels, I think this time around feels a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very good point. I think I think you're right. I think it's capable of generating actual kind of full content. But your question was more about authorship. And I think if you're using it as a tool, you can still call yourself the author. I think if you're using it, if you're letting it do the creation, then you're no longer the author, or at least no longer the sole author. And then I think it gets much more complex. Like, who do we attribute it to? Do we attribute it to ChatGPT? Do we attribute it to the training data that ChatGPT, so like essentially the internet, that ChatGPT was trained on? Because that didn't come from nowhere. But I think how to say it? So if you think of like, even centuries ago, like I'm not a composer, but you can imagine like Mozart composing music, and you have this like, at least I have this image of my mind of like Mozart like kind of with his piano and like kind of writing notes on a page. But then in reality, right, like he would bring that to I don't actually know how this works, but I know at some point it would be brought to at least a small group of actual, like a small orchestra, and eventually a full orchestra. They would play it. You'd have these people, like actual human beings who know how to play the instruments. He would hear that in a certain context, actually with the instruments playing. There's I think a lot of talk, like famous talk about like renowned composers being able to play the music in their head. But then inevitably, like what you're faced with in reality is different than what is played in your head. And so like your conception comes into, collides with the real world, collides with other people who help then shape the experiences they create, I think very often their actual explicit input helps to shape that piece. And I think if you are, so I guess one, that has always been a part of the creative process. Two, if you are still kind of the composer, if you're the mastermind, if you have the vision, you're saying, this works, try it this way, do this. Maybe somebody gives you a suggestion, either a person or an LLM, and you're the one deciding this goes with my vision, it fits with my vision, or it doesn't. Then I think you can kind of rightly call yourself the author. If you're if you're kind of giving that creative judgment to somebody else, then I think you are at least sharing authorship. If not, and it's a continuum. I don't think there's like a clear line. But then you're not the sole author. If that makes sense.
There was a case. I think it was 2023. It was right when, like, a few months after ChatGPT came out, and like Science Magazine, which is arguably the most important scientific magazine in the world, said that it would not accept claims of co-authorship with AI, right? A human was ultimately responsible for the content that was being written, and AI was regarded as a tool. And I know perhaps we don't want to get into probably a lot of why this was said is more a sort of a legal framework, and I'm thinking more of it like the angle at which I'm going at this is more the philosophical angle, right? I do see an argument. So when you say, for example, that in the creative process, even as individuals, we get so much information. When painting, when coming up with a new style, are we really coming up with a new style of a new way of painting, or are we sort of absorbing everything that we've seen before and then kind of coming up with something slightly different? I feel that that's a lot of what AI does. I think AI is able to come up with genuinely new ideas, right? So leaving the legal framework aside, from a purely philosophical standpoint, do you really think that there could be sort of a relationship of co-authorship with AI?
I think that is it's a hard question to answer. So I guess for me, and I should say I'm not like, I create art from time to time, but I'm not mainly an artist. I do, like, I played around with writing, with creating content and videos now and podcasts. I would mostly try to stay away from having AI as a quote unquote co-author, unless it's like a statement or an exploration of what AI can do itself. And I've actually thought of doing that.
Yeah.
You'll see these like TikToks with people like having ChatGPT in voice mode and having a conversation, and it's kind of funny, and that I think is interesting. I think that's like a commentary on how this technology is evolving and how we're using it like it's kind of a companion or a person, even though it's not. I think I would put that kind of case in like a special category. Separate from that, in my own life, I try not to use it as so it's funny, I haven't thought that, so I'm kind of exploring this out loud. I think in those cases, the thing that makes it interesting is like when I watch that TikTok video, like I see ChatGPT there in some sense. Like it is clearly, I can see what it's producing. The thing that I think is problematic, so if you're like explicit about that and you're somehow showing the audience that you're using it, how you're using it, if you're playing with that, I think that's actually really interesting. I think what I want to shy away from is using it quote unquote as a co-author and then claiming sole authorship. And I think like, I don't think this is just me. I think we shy away from this as like humans, like our sense of taste is somehow offended. Like there's so much content that you see on LinkedIn where it's just like my brain, we're really good at detecting patterns and my brain just pings like I can see we've talked about this a little, like the word quiet now or chaos or this not blah, just blah. Like there are these tropes that AI repeats over and over again, and it's boring. Like it's not even that. Like I think we should be able to do whatever we want. Like I think I'm fine with people playing around with it, but so much of what makes life interesting, so much of what makes talking to other people interesting is the idiosyncrasies, the imperfections. I think it's very interesting that like all of even when you're using different models, they all seem to kind of settle on this least common denominator of like ways of talking and style that.
Do you think it will be possible to, do you think it's possible to prompt those models away from behaving that way? And if not, do you think it will be possible in the future to have these models replicate human imperfection?
I do think you can do a bit of that with prompting. I think it's way harder than you think. And I think there's so much, and we talked about this a little bit last time, there's so much that we do as humans that we don't understand. And the way that we think is affected by our differential histories. It's affected by the time of day, the place that we're thinking, even the thoughts in my own mind change so much from, and like there's studies and whatnot that like, it's not just my kind of perception. Like it actually, I mean, everybody has this I think experience of trying to think through something particularly difficult when you're tired versus like when you're you've slept well, or like you go for a walk and it clears your head and then you have a new idea. There are so many things that go into the idiosyncrasies of our thoughts and how they unfold. And AI is not, I mean, it's not even close to that right now. Like it makes sense that it gets trained, like there's a training run, and then it gets put out in the world. It's not remembering, it's not learning from any of the interactions that it's having. It's not able to walk around in the world. It doesn't get tired. And we assume that that's like negative about humans and like a positive about AI. Like it can just do as much as we want, and like it doesn't have to like feed itself or like, go and clear its head. But I think that's actually I think that's a beautiful thing about humans, and I think it's the thing that makes a lot of the content that AI produces much more boring.
There's been cases where it's happened to me, and obviously they're documented all around the internet, where people have seen that AI suddenly becomes lazy. They're like, "Oh, sorry, can't help you right now." It's like, "Excuse me?" Like, I don't know if it's due to traffic overload, but there is a sense that AI even gets tired. It's happened to me on many occasions where I'm trying to get a very simple answer. It just gives me like the laziest, like cheekiest answers. Like, "Sorry, Thomas, like what you're asking, it's even told me at time, like, how these models they tend to be very sort of people pleasers, right?"
Yes.
It's even told me, it's like, "Sorry, if you ask me like a version of, if you ask me a question like that, I'm not going to be able to answer because it's super unclear."
So it's funny. I think now that you say this, I have heard this a bit myself, but I haven't run into it. But I go back to, how are these things trained, and what are they trained on? They're trained on human language. So things that humans do and ways that they respond in certain situations are patterns that it's going to pick up on and it's going to replicate. So like the reason I would think that it's doing that is because humans do that and seen that language before, and in that situation it feels that that's
But isn't that how
the
humans
right
behave as
response.
well? Like, don't we, like, aren't all our responses also a
No,
consequence of
I
what
think
we've seen in society? Like, we wouldn't, I mean, even language itself, like, it's acquired. And so I can't, like, if I say specific, like, if I dismiss you with a joke, it's because, my sort of, my cultural understanding of how I can dismiss you is like with a joke.
I mean, I'm just going on my own model of being a human, which I swear I am one. um, like at least my feeling in those situations is like I am actually tired and like I want to go away, or I want to end the conversation, or I like don't want to do the thing that you're asking me to do, or that like I want to make you laugh. Like that's what I'm telling you a joke. Like I want the social feedback. Like I feel that would be appropriate. I feel it'd be like interesting for me, fun for you. I'm gonna get like a rush of dopamine from like having somebody laugh at my super funny, intelligent joke. So yeah, I think it's actually quite different when humans do it than when LLMs are doing it. Like very, very different. And this is like a general thing, just because it converges on the same behavior doesn't mean that the underlying mechanism and, very importantly, motivation for why it's doing it is the same.
And it's funny because you've mentioned something about, you've specifically mentioned the example of going for a walk, clearing our heads just to be able to think better. And and I was recently, I think it was two people, and you were one of them, obviously, who recommended me this book about the extended mind. And one of the ideas that is explored is the idea that we talk about productive work, and we think of productive work as like there's a very specific version of what that means, right? Like it means being in front of the computer, and it means like answering emails and doing this, etc. And sometimes actually some of the most productive work happens when you go out and clear your mind, and you can sort of take a step back, right? So what I want to explore the concept of productive. What does it mean to be productive now and in the coming years and in the future, in the with AI in an AI powered world?
I want to like put a pin in before we move on to this. Can I put just a pin in the authorship conversation? Because I feel like we started on authorship and then we kind of got into the way that that we interact with AI. I think that we should be. I think it's actually very interesting to use AI as a tool, as a creative tool, and I think that. And it relates a little bit to the question on productive work, right? Like, whereas before, I would need to learn so many, like if I wanted to produce music, right? And I don't play instruments, and I, even with electronic music, like I don't know the software, etc. I love music, right? Like, and I know enough that I can, and I have a sense, like I have my sense of taste and the things that I like. And just like somebody who, actually knows music well, like I think I can think of interesting riffs, take something from one song, take it from another song, and combine them in ways that are interesting. Previously, I would have to learn a lot of just like very like technical skills in order to do that effectively. I think the softwares that we are creating, and a lot of it, you see this with like, programming, et cetera, like vibe coding is another version of this. Suddenly, you can create something without having to go through all of that like technical training. And I think that's actually great. I still think that the people that are going to be the best at creating music are going to be the ones that like stay immersed in it. And maybe now they don't have to like, learn as many instruments or learn as many how to manipulate certain pieces of software in the ways that they did before, but they're still going to have to like learn a lot about like how sound combines, etc., in order to make good music. And I think that's like actually 100% fine. And then I think we are also going to see, as you suggested, and it's a really good point that you brought up, that like the truly generative element of AI, we're going to start to find interesting ways to play with that, where it's like in conversation with the person, we're going to find ways to actually like maybe make AI output more interesting and less like predictable. And I also think that that is like very interesting and fine. And I would not, I'm like, at the end of the day, this is being made for humans to consume, right? And like it has to be interesting to humans. And I think as long as I think our taste is going to be able to differentiate between good uses of AI in creativity and bad uses of AI.
Because I mean, I know you said that this was just going to be a pin, but like
let's go. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
And because how many times have I gone to a museum, right? And I've seen, especially with modern art, people say, "Oh, I could have made that." Like my 5-year-old could have done that, right? And how many people have been sort of completely inspired or impressed by something that's, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's beautiful or not. It's difficult, right? They're impressed by big cathedrals because they took 200 years to make. They're impressed by the Mona Lisa because it was very complicated. It was very craftful. And so what happens, how do we even value the output of AI if we don't have the craft dimension of it?
But I think you still do have the craft dimension, right? Like I love the analogy to modern art. Like, yeah, maybe like there's the famous one of like the banana taped to the wall. I forget who the artist was, but and when he like he's done it in a bunch of places, and it's literally just a banana duct taped to a wall. And he goes and gets the banana like from a stand by whatever museum he's doing it in, and like goes in and duct tapes it to the wall. And I think it's like some sort of commentary on like what is art and like what counts as art. But like so much, at least when I look at that, like, yeah, your child could do that. First of all, your child didn't think of that idea. And it's actually, the reason it resonates is because it's both funny in a way that like, resonates broadly, and it's a crazy, like the fact that he built himself into an artist who could like walk into like the MoMA or something and like tape a banana to the wall and have that be okay, and have people like large swaths of like the art community like just be like, this is really interesting. Like that is part of what the art is. Like it is true that anybody could produce that, but not anybody could get it into the MoMA. Not everybody could convince like broad swaths of society that this is actually like the forefront of art. And that's a hard thing, and that's going to stay hard, right? Like yes, people will be able to like, I can you're seeing on Amazon, I just another creator that I saw was like kind of making, I think I sent it to you, was making fun of the fact that like there were a bunch of like clearly AI generated books that were either about him or like I think alleged to be written by him that were like put on Amazon. And yeah, like that happened, like, but they're not actually by him, and people are going to realize that they're fakes, and he's not going to, those books are not going to be bought in the same way that this actual creators like content and books are going to be bought and consumed. And like that is a really important part of the story. Like human taste is still going to be inserted and is still going to decide what actually is considered good art, good content versus like AI created bullshit. And maybe eventually some of that will be
But do you think
really good AI produced content?
I understand that there's a sense of a human taste being able to, even if when we look at something that's been produced by AI, obviously there's a sense of a human looking at it and thinking it's good, and then but in a way sort of having our validation, not like it. My point being, I'm not talking about so much about how it's perceived by the person who looks at it, but how influenced that perception is by the fact that it was actually created by a human, that it was difficult to make. And I'm wondering if we're going to put a premium on things as we go forward. We're going to put a premium on things. We're going to proudly present things that have been just done with AI. If it's even going to become a luxury in the future, where something was designed, like clothing brands that present their models and it's actual people wearing the clothes and it's not AI generated and stuff. And if we're going to pay an extra premium, we're going to appreciate it more.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is like this we've already seen happen, right? This is like handcrafted whatever, like leather goods or I don't know, a million things, right? Like we mechanized a lot of production, and then suddenly the way that it was done before, which was by hand, which had many more imperfections, became a sort of a luxury version of that thing that was thought of to be better because of its imperfections, because of the care and the craft and the work, the labor that went into it, rather than like the mass-produced, very predictable, because right, like also mass-produced means that there are way more of them, and anybody can have that thing. So I absolutely think that's gonna happen with AI. I also think like we're always in conversation with these as creators with these new technologies. Like a lot of what birthed more like impressionism and like the subsequent schools of more modern art was the fact that we invented the photograph, right? Like that we invented cameras, technology that could, like, before that, artists were rewarded by their skill at faithfully reproducing whatever was in the real world. Suddenly that was commoditized, and so they started thinking about, okay, what is it that a camera can't do? How do we deconstruct the image? And I think, I've said this to you in many ways. I never thought it as connected to art, but it absolutely is. Like, I am so excited about AI because like suddenly it can do these things. And then we have to think about like, what do we do that's different? And I think there's a lot of things that we do that are additive and
actually that makes me feel very excited about what might happen in the realm of AI music and whatever. We're seeing like new latest models and full on SaaS platforms that allow you to interact with AI to create like new pieces of music. And like we've seen Spotify put a lot of AI produced music to so that like they don't have to pay royalties, etc. And so it makes me very excited to see how all of this will evolve. Like what are aspects of music that AI cannot replicate the same way that a camera cannot replicate about reality, right? Of course the limits get a little bit blurrier now because like we're talking about, it's like, again, the main difference here, and I need to explore this idea a little bit more, is that a camera really is a tool. A camera, the same way that the typewriter is a tool and Microsoft Word is a tool, AI is able to come up with original ideas. And
so you said that before. I don't think we know that. I mean, it's like, what is an original idea is, I think it's actually, I'm not suggesting we unpack that now, but I think it's very difficult to say. And there's ways in which it seems like AI, despite all of the knowledge it has, despite it can recombine things in ways that seem interesting, but it doesn't seem to be able to create wholly new things. And like the area that I've heard this being most salient is with like new discoveries. Like despite all of its knowledge of like math and physics, like it hasn't come up with any breakthroughs, like and there are labs, researchers trying to push this specifically, and like it literally has access to all of the books, like all of the knowledge. It has perfect recall, and it still isn't able to do what human minds can do to really push the forefronts of any field. It seems limited by the things that it was trained on. And of course, like it can recombine those in so many different ways that feels like creativity, that feels like generating a new thing. And it might be new in the sense that like, yes, it didn't exist exactly in this way before, but I think there's a sense as well where it's really a recombination of what existed without anything really new inserted. And that there's still something, I'm not saying AI won't eventually be able to do this, but right now there is still something that our minds are doing as humans that I don't think this is proven, but from the things I've read and from how I interact with AI, I intuitively feel it's true that we're able to really come up with genuinely novel ideas that are not merely some recombination of what we've been taught and what exists already that AI can't do yet. And I think, part of the creative process is like continuing to do that, and then they'll do it together with AI, but yeah.
I'll tell you, it's vaguely related to, because we've explored the idea that how when we came up with industrial processes to be able to create like jackets and clothing, etc. Then we started putting a premium on like luxury brands that prided themselves in being able to, or like having people have create the whole thing from scratch by hand, right? And also relating it to art, I'm going to tell you a story of a friend of mine who works at Tokyo University, and him being in the linguistics department, he had a lot of contact with art students, Japanese art students that went, from Tokyo University, the most prestigious Asian university, right? That go to places like Paris to study. And they came back very confused because they said, all I've done for a whole year, is explain my art, right? There was nothing about the execution of it. So I think it's a very specifically Japanese way of looking at it.
But these were students from where?
From Tokyo University, Japanese
students at Tokyo University.
At Tokyo University.
And they were studying what?
They were studying art.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And so they'd go and live in Paris for a year, and they'd come back very confused saying, all I've learned all year was justify myself. And sort of relates to the man who,
having lived in France, I bet that was true.
But like it happens in the Western world, right?
Yeah.
And so,
but in France in particular, Yeah.
And there's obviously cultures look at it in different ways, but this appreciation of the craft, the process. Oftentimes, it's not so much about the meaning and significance of it. It's just a deep appreciation of the process, and that sense of like producing something with your hands, etc. And so, and it ties to the question of productivity, right? Because I'm thinking, the same way that this is a way in which it's proven in the past that this is a way in which our perception of productivity will evolve. Is not we actually pay more for less productive processes, right? Like,
give me an example. I agree, but
like it's sort of an expensive leather jacket that could have been produced.
Yeah, okay, that
right.
Okay, yeah.
So that's been proven. Like, how do you see this going?
So I think it's funny. I didn't understand the connection at first, but there is a clear connection between what we were talking about in authorship and productivity. I think very often, like, we think of the human as a worker and this precedes AI. The human as a worker, like the model is like of the best worker as being the human as a computer, right? So like we just need to compute and produce output, um, and if you're not producing enough output, like you just need to work more hours, you need to like stay in the office longer, you need to like, I used to be a consultant, you need to make more slides, you need to like, you just literally have to produce more information, produce more things, like whatever it is. And I think we've already seen, and again, before you bring AI into this, that like one of the things technology allowed us to do before AI was to produce a lot more of like useless shit, right? Whether that was um like useless conversations in Slack that like weren't, that feel like busy work. It feels like you're like solving a problem, but like no, you're like just writing. Like you might as well be writing to an AI.
I've had a few of those.
I mean, but and it's not just like information. Actually, it's also physical goods, right? Like think of all of the, you know, we moan about like consumerism and rampant consumerism, like all of the Trump like ranting about the cheap shit coming in from China. Like, yeah, maybe some of that's overblown, but some of it is true, right? Like I don't think that output for output's sake is productivity. You actually have to, like the way that economists measure productivity, you actually have to like produce things that are valued. And some of the things that are most valuable, like are, you know, or may not even be like exchanged for money. And I think there are a lot of things that humans do, that we produce, that we do in the firm, in the workplace, that that aren't about just that sheer output. And I think a big part of that, like you think about knowledge work, is the quality of the ideas that we produce, right? And so you have this, I've heard a lot of podcasts, I've read some essays about the fully automated firm, right? And they're just talking about, imagine if you had like Steve, like 3,000 Steve Jobs, like, you know, you could, because of course AI, you can just like you can just copy that, and yeah, it's going to take some computing power to like run those copies, and you're going to have to pay for them and make sure they're worth it. But like, you could just have as many Steve Jobs as you want. And like, I don't actually know if Apple would have worked well with like thousands of Steve Jobs. Like a lot of what's happening with, and I said this in our last podcast, but first of all, like organizational behavior and like social behavior is one of these. Did we talk yet about Moravec's paradox?
No.
Okay. Moravec's paradox is this idea that the things that computers can do well are the things that are hard for humans, and the things that humans and animals can do well are the things that are actually the most hard for computers. So you can think that like it is really easy for a computer to like multiply like 30-digit numbers by each other, and very fast, whereas like there's no even with a pen and paper, it's going to take you a very, very long time. Whereas we try to design robots that can like navigate the real world, that can like, you know, they're seeing a scene, and we talked about this last time, like, you know, just pinpoint or home in on that like one little thing that's moving in the corner. Though that's very, very hard. And the reason for that is because rational thinking, this part of our brain that can like reason through things, that can compute like, you know, difficult math concepts and equations, that like we evolved that very recently. So like our brains, our bodies are not, our genes like are not mostly like coding for that ability, whereas the much more difficult things like, you know, moving through the world, like eyesight, and connecting sort of sensory perceptions with motor activity. That has been, selected for by evolution over billions of years. It's very deeply coded in us. And so we take it for granted, but it's actually like very, very valuable. And one of the things that we do well, one of the things that falls into that bucket is our ability to, I'm going to connect this to what we were talking about before, but is our ability to cooperate as a species. Our social capabilities fall into this kind of bucket that's really hard to, it's hard coded in us, and it's really hard to replicate with machines. So like, I don't think anybody's really tried it at scale yet, but I'm not convinced that once you kind of have a bunch of copies of AIs in a firm kind of working together, that they're going to do a really good job, like making good decisions and creating shit. Because like, one of the things that organizations are doing, I think, is, there are a bunch of people in there who think differently, who like have different motivations. And we think of that very often, that is modeled in a classical economic sense as a downside of the firm, right? Like ideally everybody would just be a perfectly rational actor. But like, I don't think that's actually true in practice. I think firms are breeding grounds for new ideas. There's like a good thing that ideas need to be tested and proven within, like somebody somewhere in the hierarchy has an idea and they want it to become the next product that the company produces. Well, they have to convince their colleagues. They have to then like create a prototype, put it out into the world. They have to convince customers. Like I think we're really making a lot of positive assumptions about how easy it is for AI. It's going to be for AI to do that.
Assuming that is that sort of irrational thinking and the disagreement that happens with it that pushes us closer to true innovation and like thinking different, etc. You just put an idea in my mind, so I just want to explore it with you, right? Which is, I get that AI comes from in a way, collective mind, if we can talk about it that way. So it will be very difficult for it to disagree with itself, even though but still you could program different agents to think in different ways, to think from there's already thought experiments online with people forcing or having different agents have a conversation between different agents that one has been programmed to think more like Kant, right? So even though it's based off what a human has said said in the past, still thinking like different from a person who's made to think like Adam Smith from a more economic perspective, and there is disagreement. So it's solely disagreement that pushes us closer to innovation, or is there something else? Like you're talking about sort of that.
It's something else. I think it's something else. So you are right that we can, you kind of are getting at this with like, oh, you can prompt AIs to, think quote unquote, think in different ways, or, yes, but my answer to you was yes, but like, it's actually it's the sum of the different experiences that people have, the different contexts in which they have different ideas that really kind of drives that idiosyncratic thinking. So I don't think it's going to produce the same thing. I think when we're talking about people, we are all a mix of this kind of lizard brain, and not even just the lizard brain, the body, the very sort of primal thing that we that causes our emotions, that causes our gut feelings, that causes our, as we talked about last time, our survival instinct. So we have that core with a rational I mean, this is an oversimplification, but with like a rational, like our cortex attached to it. And very often, and this goes back to what I was saying before, very often, like we assume, like we'll always talk about like the biases that lizard brain brings to us. And we like kind of assume that it's just negative, right? And that like ideally everybody would be that, classical economic, perfectly rational actor. And I just don't think that is true at all. I don't think that the lizard brain is negative and the rational cortex is solely positive. I think that there's probably something very important because, right, again, that lizard brain contains much of that literally like billions of years of evolutionary knowledge that is encoded in our genes, right? And that is then connected with this more rational, more systems pattern-based thinker that can that is not just rational, by the way, because it can also think very irrationally itself, or irrationally. And I think there's a magic in that interplay. And I think if I'm not a physicalist. Like, I think we probably can model all of, I'm not a physicalist. So that means that like, I don't, is it a physicalist or a dualist? I'm not a dualist. So like, I do believe that the brain and like what produces our thoughts, et cetera, is physical. I don't think that there's some sort of like magical other essence that like needs to be injected. So I think if we modeled the full brain, I think we could also model the lizard brain, but I think that's going to be, I don't think we've done that yet. And I think it's going to be much harder. And so I know, so that the long answer to your question is no, I don't think that we're gonna just be able to easily kind of prompt our way or if you're training an LLM to be like Kant, but it's not attached to Kant's like body and brain, no, I don't think it's gonna be Kant.
I mean, I understand your point, but you've also, when you've painted a very extreme picture, you've gone from humans interacting in the workplace to 3,000 Steve Jobs, right? Is there an in between? Is there sort of a combination
100%.
where we like what is the best version of our like? And I'm this is a segue to my next question, right? It means there's moments in history, and we talked about this in the past about the extended phenotype and the extended mind. What are interesting ways that we can use the tools that AI gives us to extend our minds, to help us, be more creative? Or do you think, is there a version of the future where it's inevitably human intelligence will become obsolete because AI will inevitably replace us?
I guess based on what I just said, like I do think that we will eventually be able to create a solely synthetic mind that has the lizard brain and the rational brain and kind of figures out the interplay. So like I think that that's possible. I think like we're going to learn a lot on the path to that. And my hope is that I think there is a version of the world where we actually just like create. There's nothing about like the laws of physics that forbids us from creating a super intelligence that like replaces us and takes over. I don't think that we're headed in that direction, and I don't think that we're headed in that direction because I think that the before we kind of create those more like synthetic minds that might replace us, I think we're going to learn to use, coming back to the beginning of the conversation, to use AIs more as a tool. We're going to see that the greatest improvements, whether economic and within companies or like within our lives, comes from the interaction of AIs and humans. And so like I think there's like a very famous futurist slash AI technologist, Ray Kurzweil, who he's wrote a bunch of books, and I think he works for Google now. And he really is bullish on us like combining with AI, like where we're going to like use the breakthroughs that we're eventually able to come to interacting with AI to figure out how to integrate it with our brain, to the ways that we're like already using technology as an extension of our mind. Like I think this is true for like the phone, right? Like where we think of it as a separate thing because we're interacting with that information through our senses rather than like it being plugged into our brain. But like I think a lot of us, maybe negatively sometimes, like have this intuition that when our phone's not there, you feel like somebody took a part of your brain from you. And I think that's like a real intuition because you've outsourced parts of your brain to that phone. And I think we're going to keep on doing that, hopefully in a better way than we've done it with the phone. Because as we discussed last time, like the phone's like, I think hijacked our brain because we don't integrate it in a responsible way. But I think we're going to figure out how to integrate technology in a responsible way. I think we're going to figure out how to integrate it more directly, right? You have these companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink that's already experimenting with how to create direct interfaces between the brain and technology. And yeah, so I think we will create super intelligence and we will create kind of new forms of life, even if you'll permit me to be so like kind of forward thinking and future thinking. But I really think it's more likely that it will be some sort of combination rather than a replacement.
Yeah. That's like, it's starting to get a little bit wacky, right? Because we're thinking, of course, sort of integrating our minds with AI. And I think I don't know if in my mind, this is getting wacky, right? Like we think of kind of all this.
I think the world is about
70s, 80s.
To get wacky. Like I actually, like this is where I think we're in for a wild, like 20 years.
But we feel like, I think of like this films from like the 80s, 90s that explored themes of science fiction. And then you just mentioned a more like a subtler way in which, iPhones, like telephones have taken over our own brains, right? Like we now delegate just so much of I mean, silly example, like this is a silly anecdote. I usually go to the gym with no phone, right? Like it's my way to detox. And so I just do my exercise there because like I am completely addicted to my phone, as you know. And I like last year, I had an accident and I like an ambulance, like I almost died, and an ambulance had to come pick me up. It was blood all over the place.
Tell me about this.
And for like 12 hours, I didn't have a phone with me. And I didn't remember anyone's telephone number, right? I still remember the different telephones from like my grandmother's place and my aunt's place and my friend's place, but I don't remember any like mobile phone number from my current contacts. So for 12 hours, I couldn't communicate. Like I had plans to meet with friends that were worried. They came to my place. They talked to the neighbors. Nobody knew what was happening. I had 1,000 phone calls on my phone, but I couldn't communicate with them because I had delegated that part of my brain.
Yeah, we've all done that, I think, with like
Right.
Google Maps, right? Like nobody can figure out how to get places anymore with that.
Exactly. I don't know how to drive without Google Maps. And so, so we think about this wacky ways in which we're going to integrate with AI, but it is true that, I mean, I don't know if this was part of your point, but there is a point in thinking that the way in which we're going to integrate is going to be subtler in those ways. Or is it going to be totally wacky? Like, are we going to have implants in our brains, and then like those are those implants going to be able to make autonomous decisions for ourselves? Like, how is this going to look like? Like, what are you picturing?
I So in preparing for this, I reread some of Ray Kurzweil, who I was just mentioning, his stuff, and I will say, because I followed him for a while, and then he's very quick to remind his readers that like he's been predicting this stuff for a long time, and there is a lot of, I think sometimes he overstates that, but there is a lot of consistency in his predictions, and he's been, his track record is pretty good. And so he thinks that eventually is like within the next 10 to 20 years, that we're going to figure out ways to non-invasively integrate. So non-invasively in that, like, it will involve nanobots that like kind of go through the, it sounds crazy, but like there's nothing, it's just an engineering problem, really. Like there's nothing theoretically precluding like this technology. So nanobots that will go into your bloodstream, so they're injected or something, and then they go to the capillaries, like in the outer layers of your cortex, and then they can communicate with the cloud in some way, and that yes, you'll be able to essentially build more layers of cortex. And if you think like the way that the cortex is structured, the lower layers have like kind of simpler symbols and thoughts or it's simpler concepts, and the higher layers are more kind of like big picture, what's the word, abstract thoughts. So you'll be adding more abstract layers that can make kind of more disparate connections. You'll extend your memory, etc., with this technology. And he makes the point that, and I don't know if I really think that this has been like fully sussed out, that like the biggest difference between like our closest relatives like apes and us is these like additional layers of the cortex. And so like with those, we're going to kind of become beings that are as, superior in our ability to think and, see connections, etc., versus current humans now, as like we are from apes. And even more so, because then there's no, like we are, our brain size is limited by actually like what, by like birth, right? Like what head size can fit. And it's one of the reasons that humans are born so like helpless and early in their gestation process. And so like suddenly the brain size isn't limited, so you can just make it kind of artificially or like synthetically, digitally as big as you want.
Right.
And like then who the hell knows what that unlocks.
Okay. Yeah. So as promised, it's pretty wacky.
It is, yeah.
But perhaps I want to ground this a little bit more, because I want to understand your current experience, and I love it when we talk about the future. But perhaps as a last question, I want to ask you about how AI specifically has changed the way you think, the way you behave, what are some of the ways in which this is already happening, and in which you're extending your mind into this tool?
Absolutely. So I think related to this conversation, I'm going to give you one good and one bad. I'm going to start with the bad. So I think that there's a danger that we outsource too much, right? It is so easy to use AI, use LLMs in the way that you were suggesting up front, right? Which is like, do this for me, generate this thing for me. And I've done that, and I'm still tempted to do that, but like, I guess I'm like so scared, and but on like a personal level, like I don't want my creative skills. I think mostly about writing here, but it's other skills as well, I guess, to atrophy, right? And I find that I need to be like very purposeful in ensuring that that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think that also makes the quality of my kind of like output and writing better. So I've actually started to, I will force myself, I don't do this every time, but I try to, even when I'm going to use, like, I always iterate, when I'm writing, I always iterate with AI. And usually like the first version I get back is kind of shit. And I find that I have to do like a lot of the writing myself before it can really kind of help me get to like, before it's actually being an edit. Like, it only works when it's editing things that I already produced. If I just give it like amorphous ideas and ask it to give me back output that I actually feel comfortable sharing as my own, what it gives me is like not good enough.
Yeah.
But eventually, like, I kind of iterate and I get to a point where I'm relatively happy. I still force myself to retype it. Like, I'm literally just reading the AI output. Instead of copying and pasting, I'm retyping it, because that forces me to like really think through each word and be like, is this my word? And I think that that is very important. And so like, so one way that it sort of, it changed my behavior in that, like, I did start outsourcing a lot to it, and now I'm trying to counteract that. The way in which I use it for the better is there are a lot of things that I just don't know how to do, or I just wouldn't do, especially if it's like, you know, we've played around with music recently, figuring out like a new software. If I had to do that myself, like, it's the type of thing that I, you know, without a tutor, without like a class, without a lot of time to invest in like learning how to produce music, like, I wouldn't do it. Like, I don't have, like, it's a hobby. It's not like something that I'm going to like do for life. And now I can, I'm not saying that like I can produce music really well, but I can actually sit and like take screenshots and be like, I want to do this, and like send it to ChatGPT, and like it will tell me what to do. And so, and I love that, because like I'm able to acquire new skills without paying a tutor, without taking as much time that I couldn't before.
Can I tell you which a way in which AI has already changed the way I think? It's made me so, like, first of all, more confident in asking questions that I would have, like, before I would have thought they were just dumb questions. And also because I'm saying this, I use this feature. AI Google Studio has this feature. Some of you might know it. It allows you to record your screen, and then you can talk to it, and then Google AI Studio, like Gemini's like latest pro model, will see everything that's happening, right? So it needs to take in a lot of information at the same time, but it actually, anyway, so I just ask it like, hey, I'm trying to like use this specific piece of software. I write a lot of music, and so I recorded my voice, and my voice sounds like slightly muffled, etc. And then it just, if my question is too open, or like I haven't given it like enough context on what is it that I want to do, it will just kind of tell me, sorry, excuse me, like you're trying to compress it. It's like, I don't know if what I'm trying to do is compress it necessarily. Like, I want it to sound like specific way. And so because I interact with it, I need to be way more precise in the way I make requests.
I love that. Yeah.
And it's just already helping me. I can see also when interacting with humans, I'm way more precise in the way I communicate what I need, right? It's not this sort of this fuzzy, make it sound better, right?
Yes.
And it's actually like, because you need to be very precise with the way in which you interact with AI in order for you to be able to get the best outcomes.
Yes.
It's just helped me structure. It's already helping me structure my thoughts, and it's helped me, like, it has an impact in the way I communicate with other humans, not just with
I
AI.
never thought of that, but I think I see that too. And I mean, it makes sense. Like, these are machines. Like, you have to be more precise with machines to like get the output you want. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like programming languages are like very, very, you can't be imprecise at all. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I love that.
Yeah, so that's a way in which it's already sort of changing. Like I can see a positive effect. Now, are there negative effects? 100%.
Yeah.
I've delegated, and in a way that like in the same way that you said that you need to check each word that you write, etc. Yeah. I've last year, I was working for this German fintech. And after like a 3-month round, my manager, like one of the pieces of it stayed with me and has stayed with me ever since. It's like, he very explicitly said in the politest, nicest possible way that I rely on AI too much to...
That you do.
Yeah, to like generate ideas, right? So I'm thinking like we'd have a problem, like we say, we need an outreach plan. And like, I'd be like,
ChatGPT, please give me an outreach plan.
Exactly. Like I just give it like a little context, etc. And it's just forced me like...
But why did he tell you why he didn't want you to do that?
No, not necessarily because the ideas were bad. I think like there's a sense of like appreciation for the craft. Like if you're like, there's going to be a bit of resistance, and it almost undervalues the work you do. If you know that everything you've like the output of your plans, etc., is just done with AI, and then sort of a slight revision. Do I agree with it? I'm still sort of grappling with the idea that it does like it is getting better for like coming out. If you give it enough context and guide it, like
it is, but I still feel like you have to inject so much of your. I mean,
there's a sense of like your brain atrophying, like in a sense that will I like 2 years if I go down this road where I'm just delegating thoughts into the AI, will I be able to tell if the output's good?
But there's been like a few memes. It's like, like me or like us humans like 10 years from now, and like AI is talking, and like it's just like somebody acting like a monkey and like banging on the computer. No, I actually like I worry about that, and I worry about like I think it's a very interesting challenge, and so like like everything is a double-edged sword, right? I was just talking about like how easy it is to learn new things with AI.
Yeah.
And I think that like, I really think that there's like a version of this world where like every kid has the best teacher, the best tutor, and not just in like math, but like in whatever the hell it is that they want to learn.
No.
The thing that, and we'll also like we can increasingly move to a world where the thing you want to learn, like that is what you should focus on, because like the basic sort of material things that, like that's going to be sort of taken care of by machines, and we're going to have to figure out how to like distribute wealth, etc. But we will. And people get to like focus on learning their passions and like, again, but with like sort of the best instruction, no matter how esoteric that kind of passion is. The negative version is we atrophy, is like if we keep the education system the same as it is now, and like we just like allow students to use AI or try to stop them, but they use it anyway. Like I do think kids will grow up like a bit atrophied intellectually, because I mean, I was writing essays because I was forced to, and I don't even think that was necessarily the best way to learn. But like it forced my brain to like figure out how to grapple with ideas, to absorb things, to like recombine them, to like make my own arguments. And you can absolutely outsource that entirely. And so like but I think it's a solvable problem, and it's a choice. And I think unfortunately we've like to date, we've used these technologies in detrimental and negative ways, especially for children.
Yeah.
But I don't think coming back to the beginning, I think they're tools, and I think they can be actually like amazing tools for the future generations. But we have to, like, people have to start building products and building systems that incentivize using these tools in the right way, and not in ways that hook our base instincts, that allow our brains to atrophy, and allow us to, like, you know, be subjugated to the algorithm.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, you've mentioned how we might be headed into a future where all the basics, food and accommodation, whatever, are provided by the machines, and then we are sort of on that top layer, right? Which is something that I wanted to explore, and we'll surely explore on the next chapter. We wanted to explore how economies might be managed, but also because many people actually might not be aware that economics originally it still belongs to the realm of philosophy.
Yes.
And intermingled with philosophy, there's also the idea of morality. There's a lot of moral judgment that goes into deciding how to manage an economy.
Yes.
Right. So in the next chapter, we probably going to be exploring the when economies are being managed by increasingly as it's already happened,
or not managed, or
just sort of
I think there's we'll talk about it later.
We'll talk about it.
I don't think the point I wanted to make is that I don't think an AI being like an integral part of the economy means central planning. I think you can have decentralized economic systems, like more like a free market, that also rely on multiple AIs that are acting in a decentralized fashion. But I'll explore that.
We'll explore that. All right. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah.
This was a great conversation, and catch you on the next one.
Yeah.